So let's take a look at political parties and the two-party system, the evolution, a little bit on minor parties and party organization, some key terms, and then a little bit more on psychological and sociological factors to finish out this notebook um, that we didn't quite get to. So political parties, obviously, remember we talked about the more earlier in the year. The political party's sole goal is to get elected. Their sole goal, one of the major functions of political parties, is to work on their candidates getting elected. They have a couple other functions, but one of their major goals is not sole, I guess. One of the major goals is to look at getting elected and driving that. So I'm going to go through some slide and I'll guide you on what you should be putting down here as far as on this in a color other than black, please. Okay. I'm going to hide my head, and here we go. So looking at the two-party system, why do we have the two-party system? Well, in short, because we've always had a two-party system. I know that sounds kind of like whatever, but we've always had some sort of two-party system. I want to look at a slide. No, I don't want to look at the slideshow. We've always had some sort of two-party system that we've used to operate. So this two-party system has a historical basis rooted in the beginning of the nation itself. So something about we've always had it. It's always started with the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Now we've come to the point where the force of tradition is that we've always accepted the fact that we've always had a two-party system. We've always had one. So that will guide your response. That will guide your response here. We've always had one. It's always been there. And it's historically rooted in the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, which we learned about earlier in the year. So that's a factor as well. I need to come back to. So this covers what reasons do we have it, and now we're going to get into how is it different from a one-party system. How is it different from a one-party system? So it's different from a one-party system. It's different because in a one-party system, you have the party is the ruling for all practical purposes. It's really a no party. So the idea that only one political party is allowed. That's how it's different from a multi-party or two-party system. Only one political party is allowed. So essentially, it's a dictatorship. The party is the party of the ruling clique, so to speak. It's quite accurate to say that the resulting is really like no party because it's just one party. Sometimes they refer to themselves as a people's party or something like that to kind of make people think that they're part of a party, but they're really not. So that's how it differs from a one-party system. It's the idea that there are more than one party allowed. So, and again, multi-party systems, could have broader representation of people, and that could be a factor too. The two political parties that have dominated the nation's politics for 125 years, I think we know what those are. But the Democrats and the Republicans. Here we are, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So look at the party choice. Historically, those in higher income groups have tended to be Republicans, or those in lower income groups tend to be Democrats. But the Democrats and the Republicans, right? The Democrats and the Republicans, those are the groups that have dominated the nation's politics for 125 years. Democrats and Republicans. So there are also been other minor parties over the years, and in varying levels of importance. Other minor parties in varying levels of importance. Ideological, single issue, economic protests, splinter parties. So I think the question is simply with you guys is simply here. The question is simply what is the importance of minor parties? Two ways they have affected major parties. The importance of the minor parties. So the importance of the minor parties and how they affected it. So um, there's some different types of ones: economic protest, single issue parties, splinter parties. Those have splintered away from the major parties, like Roosevelt's Bull Moose Progressive Party. So here's two ways, and single party issues like the Prohibition Party, Women's Party, ideological parties. Those based on socialist labor, worker, libertarian, just based on some sort of economic or ideological form. I showed you the voting ballot earlier, and these parties have a place in the ballot, but rarely do they get elected. But they do sometimes drive some of the debate. Sometimes, major parties that have fielded presidential candidates, but they're there, and they do have some influence. So why are they important? They can play a spoiler role in an election occasionally. A minor party does not win any electoral votes, even presidency or any other race. It can pull votes from one of the major parties. The Green Party did this in 2012. Um, the Bull Moose Party of Teddy Roosevelt, after he quit the party, he pulled um, votes away from Taft, and Woodrow Wilson was able to win with 435 electoral votes. The Bull Moose Party, the Progressive Party, pulling away votes from the William Howard Taft. So the other reason most a spoiler role, the third party, they can play a spoiler role. So that's one reason that they're good. One reason, but the importance of minor parties is they drive some of the intellectual. They drive some of the bring issues to the table that might not otherwise be there. The other thing is that their role is a critic and an innovator. They're willing to take clear cut stands on controversial issues. So and they draw attention to issues that major parties have ignored: income taxes, suffrage, over the years, old age pensions. But when their proposals have gained any support, sometimes the major parties say, "Oh, look, this was our idea." So this can become frustrating for the minor parties after they've established that base, so to speak. So that talks about the minor parties and how that ends up working. The other thing is party organization. Party organization. So party organization is what are three basic elements of a major party, and what factors explain the current state of parties and the party system. So let's look at the three major elements of the party. There's state and local party machinery that operate at the lowest levels, the wards and precinct level, and nominations are often controlled by the party. But the three major components are right here: the organization, those who control the party machinery. Each individual party has, a each party, Republican and Democrat, the two major ones, have a hierarchical organization that runs the operations of the party, even beyond the elected officials. That's the party organization: Republican National Committee, Democratic National Committee. The party component, the party and the electorate, those who almost always vote for the party's candidate. The party and the electorate. So this is those who almost always vote for the party candidate, and then those are the people that are loyal Republicans and Democrats, and then the party and the government. Those are the office holders, the senators, representatives, the president. At the lower levels, the city councilmen, state legislatures. That is who holds the party there, the party in the government. So that's the three basic elements. Now, what factors explain the current state of the party and the party system? Well, the political parties have never been very popular. People have mixed feelings about them. We accept them as necessary, but then we should think that they should be watched and controlled. Um, so parties are getting weaker. There are a growing number of people who regard themselves as independents, a growing number of people who regard themselves as independents. So, a number of voters, so this is less and less and less people. So, the current state of parties is, I would say, um, we closely watch them, but then more and more people are moving away from parties and regarding themselves as independents, taking part in split ticket voting, so they don't always vote with the party like they used to. These are certainly factors that play a role in our party. So people just don't aren't happy. Look at the aspects of what's just been happening here in 2000 and the beginning of 2021 when some people are supporting Trump as he's trying to um, stay in office and dispute the election. And there's other people who say, well, no, we need to get on with our democracy within the Republican Party. There's different viewpoints of that. So that's certainly a factor. Now, um, the the other thing is that looking at the party organization, how is the party organized? So this is we need to make some matching here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this with you. So let me zoom out. The national chairperson. This is the party machinery of national chairperson of a or national chairperson, national convention. The national convention, we've already talked about. This is the event where formally the party formally names its candidates for president. Um, the local the party's leader when in power is the national um, the leader who runs a party's campaign and national convention is the national chairperson. Okay. The national committee is a group that helps run the party's business, a group that helps run the party business. We already talked about the president. One of the many hats that he wears is chief of party, right? Well, there you go. The president of the United States, chief of party, when he's in power. A precinct is what is a small unit in the electoral map at the lowest level in the city, and then the excuse me those where all the voters report in one place. That's at a precinct level, and this is a local unit where the city is divided, a ward. Just sometimes party politics run at a very local level too, all the way down to the precinct and ward level. So I've put those terms in, and dragged and dropped them into the right place, so you see them there accordingly. We drag them and drop them into the right place. So there you go. To look at it from that perspective. Um, and the other thing that I want to talk about we didn't get to in class was the idea of sociological and psychological factors. Sociological and psychological factors. So that dictate voting. We already talked about voting and why people don't vote and some voter behaviors, but let's look at um, sociological and psychological factors that dictate voting. So some sociological factors, why people vote, why people have voters preference. So here they are: income and occupation, education, gender and age, religious and ethnic background, geography, family and other groups. So how do voters form their opinions? How do voters form their behavior? It's not just the parties that run this. There's other sociological factors that play in. Why do people associate with the parties the way they do? Some of it's just, we told you Republicans tend to be more, from more wealthier families, and Democrats tend to be from poor working class families, and that tends to be the way it is today. So income and occupation, education, sometimes um, edu- college educated people tend to be more Democratic for whatever reason, especially um, you know higher ed people, masters and so on. But then there's other factors. Geography, rural tends to be Republican. City dwellers, urban tend to be Democrat. Gender and age, religious and ethnic backgrounds. These are all factors that play in to how people are going to vote, and how they see themselves as a voter, and their voting behavior both as a voter and then for how they vote. Um, Psychological factors, again, people who vote typically have a higher income, college graduates, high occupational status. That's one thing. People who do not vote, younger, married, unskilled. So these are psychological factors too. Um, the perceptions of their party, the candidates, and issues significantly affect their voting. Um, Party identification, loyalty of people to a particular party. These are the psychological factors. So here, this is the last step. Psychological factors are included. Psychological factors as we look at this. So psychological loyalty people to a particular political party or candidates and issues are two short-term factors that can influence even the most loyal Democrat or Republican. People can vote out of their chosen party if they dislike a candidate or stand on a political issue. Trump is a good example of that. There are Republicans that have split from him. There's more Republicans that are splitting from him. There's independent voters who've come over to Trump. There's independent voters who've come over to other people. So again, less and less and less people are identifying with the political party over the years. But loyalty of people to is the single most important, lasting predictor of how a person will vote. But still, party identification is still a lasting factor. Party identification. So again, um, the idea is that typically higher income people tend to vote, longer term residents with a strong sense of party identification. But more and more people, and this is where Democrats can make their hay a little bit, is the unmarried, unskilled, more non-voters live in the South of rural in urban areas, which is interesting. Um, but people who do not vote are younger. Driving that younger vote is something the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is especially tried to do. So coming back to all of this, you may have to go back and listen. I didn't necessarily spoon feed this in the exact same way that you might expect me to. I did some explanation of this, so you may need to stop this at certain points and come back to it as we go along here. But this explains the political parties and then how that has an impact on voting and voting behaviors.